Welcome to The Numbers Game, the show where analytics meets the action and data drives the decisions. I'm Cynthia Frelund. It is the NFL postseason, and this is our Wildcard Weekend Primer, where together we'll dive deep into the stats that define this week's Saturday AFC Wildcard matchups between the Chargers and Texans and Steelers and Ravens. We will uncover how the numbers make all the difference because it's not just about what happens, it's about why it happens and how the data helps tell the story. I live in Southern California and we are experiencing some terrible fires. I really appreciate everyone who's reached out to make sure that we're safe. Luckily, I live far enough south that we're only dealing with ash and smoke. Many of my colleagues and friends are evacuated and have no idea if their homes are okay. Thank you for checking on me, and if you're impacted, I hope you're doing as well as you can. I'm going to seek out the best way to support the firefighters and displaced animals, and if you want that information, I can give it to you. Just reach out. I'm grateful for the space to share that, and thank goodness we have amazing games this weekend to help lift the spirits of football fans everywhere. Thank you, as always, for spending some of your time and energy here with me. In Week 18, my model went 12 wins and 4 losses straight up, 8-8 against the spread, and 8-8 on totals, which means for the 2024 season, my final results are 71.7% straight up, 53.3% against the spread, and 49.8% on totals. Looking back at my model's trends over the season, the teams I picked correctly the most often were the Chiefs, with all 17 games being accurately chosen, the Lions, which I got right 16 times, and then the Bengals, Texans, Raiders, and Titans. They all were correctly chosen straight up 14 times. The teams I got wrong the most often were number 1, the Cardinals, which I messed up 8 times, then the Falcons, Browns, Colts, Jets, and Steelers. I got those wrong 7 times each. Pulling back the nerd curtain a little bit here, this season I asked my model to use late 80s, early 90s movie characters as the dummy names for teams. This is part of how I keep myself unbiased and also very entertained. Fun fact, Axel, Martin, John, and Hans were the most correctly picked character team names. So Beverly Hills Cop, Die Hard, and Grosse Pointe Blank all accounted for, which is really interesting because there were a ton of character options that were not police or police adjacent movies. Anyways, very interesting stuff, but moving on. I asked 2 of my favorite NFL Network research coworkers for their favorite season note, and I love their results. First, our Bills fan makes a very strong case for his quarterback to be the MVP. He notes that Josh Allen joined Aaron Rodgers as the only 2 players in NFL history with at least 40 offensive touchdowns in at least 5 seasons. Allen has done it 5 times now, and Rodgers did it 6. Rodgers won MVP in 4 of those seasons, and Allen doesn't have his first one, at least not yet. Allen is the only player in NFL history with 40-plus offensive touchdowns in 5 straight seasons, and this year he has 12 fewer interceptions than last season. Allen also has 72 fewer snaps while trailing, and the fewest snaps per game in the fourth quarter while trailing at just 8.3. Lamar Jackson, for example, has trailed for 17.4 snaps per game in fourth quarters, which is the 6th most. My interpretation of this argument is that he believes Allen is locking it up earlier, in large part because he's not turning the ball over, which drives his value higher than any other player this season. Second, the best fantasy football mind in the building wants me to point out that this is the year of rookies. She notes that there are only 5 total rookies who have 100-plus receptions and 1,000 or more receiving yards in NFL history, and 2 of them came from this season's class in Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers. Okay, let's get into the postseason and start where the playoffs officially start, which is with an AFC matchup between the number 5 ranked Chargers heading to Houston to face the number 4 ranked Texans. Los Angeles is a 3-point road favorite, and the total is 42.5 points. One of the bigger keys in this game forecast to be the battle of pressure. Next Gen Stats shows that Justin Herbert and CJ Stroud were 2 of only 7 quarterbacks to take over 100 quarterback hits in the regular season. Only Joe Burrow took more than CJ Stroud's 109. The Texans quarterback has also been sacked by an unblocked rusher 10 times, which ranks second only to Caleb Williams. He took 13 unblocked sacks this season. However, the Bolts defense ranks 14th in pressure rate at 34.5%, and the Texans, they are second best at 37.8%. And because I think it matters here, the Chargers have allowed the 7th fewest, and the Texans have allowed the 8th fewest explosive passes to be caught. So those are ones netting 15 or more yards. Both teams have rookie secondary contributors that are absolutely X factors. Los Angeles finished with the number one regular season scoring defense, allowing just 17.7 points per game. This is the third time in franchise history that they've had the number one scoring defense. Fun fact, the team with the number one scoring defense has not made the Super Bowl since the 2016 Pats. On offense, Justin Herbert became the third player in NFL history to have 3 or fewer interceptions with 400-plus passing attempts. The other two, Aaron Rodgers in 2018 and Tom Brady in 2016. We've tracked this for a while, so let's finish it out. Herbert finished the regular season with 18 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions when not under pressure, becoming the first qualified quarterback to have 0 interceptions versus no pressure in the next-gen stats era. Just as a reminder of why I think this is so powerful, clean pocket data is a great predictive measure of season-over-season changes, and it's a good proxy for the best a quarterback can do. In the passing game, rookie Ladd McConkey was top 5 in receptions, receiving yards over expected, and receiving touchdowns from the slot. But Houston's defense has allowed the lowest completion percentage at just 56.5%, with the most interceptions, they had 9, to slot receivers. But also, they've allowed the most such passing touchdowns with 14, meaning high risk, high reward. CJ Stroud is the 4th quarterback in NFL history to start a home playoff game in each of his first 2 seasons. The others, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, and Dan Marino. Zone and false pre-snap looks that appear to be man but turn into zone have been a source of concern for the sophomore quarterback. Stroud has 9 passing touchdowns with 10 interceptions against zone coverage, and the Chargers use it at the 4th highest rate on almost 80% of snaps. Going a little deeper here, CJ Stroud has averaged 6.7 yards per attempt against split safety coverages this season, and that's compared to 8.8 against them last season. That 8.8 was the second most per attempt. This year, LA uses split safeties at the second highest rate on about 54% of snaps. However, in the passing game, Nico Collins has earned a first down on 14.5% of his routes run, which is the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. The trenches and run games are another big key to this one. The Chargers have a lot of people who were limited in practice as of this recording, including 3 offensive linemen, with tackle Rashawn Slater being the one I think is a real question mark. By the way, he's allowed the 3rd fewest pressures among left tackles this season. Both J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they are limited. Signing Ezekiel Elliott to the practice squad at least sends up some signals like something's at least up there. The Texans have been practicing without Shaq Mason, but the running back room, they appear to be healthy. Bottom line, I have the home team with a 1-point upset, 22-21 Texans. I will say the Texans winning ranks 6th of the 6 games in confidence on the week, though. I specifically left the run game note for last because it dovetails right into the edge Houston has in this one, as in defending the run. The Texans have used nickel personnel at the 2nd highest rate this season, 81% of the time, and they've allowed the 3rd fewest yards per rush when using it, just 4.2 yards per attempt. In the run defense metrics that matter most, they are top 7 when using nickel. For example, rushing yards over expected per carry allowed, EPA per carry allowed, rushing success rate allowed, yards before contact per carry allowed. And by the way, the Chargers, they average 4.4 yards per rush against nickel. That's 10th fewest. They have the 4th lowest success rate against it and have been tackled for a loss or no gain at the 6th highest rate. Oh, and they have the 8th fewest yards before contact per carry against it. Factor in a banged up O-line, a banged up running back room, and you can see why my model picked the narrow upset. But again, this is 6 of the 6 games or lowest in confidence. I love Saturday night NFL games, and we get the Steelers and Ravens in Baltimore for the season's 3rd installment of this epic AFC North rivalry. They split the regular season 1-1, and it just feels like the football gods need us to appreciate how great it is to see Tomlin and Harbaugh playing chess once more this season, and in freezing cold football weather, no less. The Ravens are 9.5-point favorites. The total is 43.5 points. And as a reminder, the Ravens are the 3 seed and the Steelers are the 6. In the past 4 seasons, division opponents have met 7 times in the postseason, and the higher seeded team has won each of those matchups. Fun fact to tell your friends. Pittsburgh is on a 4-game skid where they've only averaged 14.3 points per game. That is about half as many as in Russell Wilson's first 7 starts when they were averaging 28.4 points per game. Russell Wilson himself has averaged 5.7 passing yards per attempt in that 4-game losing streak after averaging 8.4 passing yards per attempt in his first 7 starts. George Pickens finished the regular season with the most deep receptions. He had 15 20-plus air yard grabs. He also had 13 receptions of 30-plus yards, which is tied with Jamar Chase for the most. Since the beginning of 2023, no receiver has a higher yard per reception average than Pickens at 16.7. This season, he had 515 yards off of deep passes, which is the second most in the league. However, last week, he had his first career game with multiple drops. Over their 4-game losing streak, the Steelers' defense has allowed 27.3 points per game, which is considerably more, as in 9 points, than their 18.3 point per game average over the first 13 games of the season. The defense is tied for the league's best with 33 takeaways, and they had 12 games with multiple takeaways, which is the most in the NFL. Individual Steelers defenders need some more love, though. Let's start with Nick Herbig, who has the 5th highest individual pressure rate this season. It's 17.6%. Then we have Cam Hayward, who's the only player in the NFL with 10 or more tackles for loss and 10 or more passes defensed in 2024. He had 12 TFLs and 11 passes defensed. He also had 8 sacks. Then we have Alex Highsmith, who has 6 sacks, 9 TFLs, and 13 quarterback hits. And remember, he missed 6 games. And of course, there's TJ Watt, who led the league with 6 forced fumbles and 3 strip sacks. He also had 11.5 sacks, though over the past 3 games, he hasn't registered a sack or a hit. Fun fact, though, TJ Watt is the only player to average over 1.0 sacks per game in divisional games in NFL history. He even beat out his brother. He's sub 1 sack per game. And last but not least, there's Minkah Fitzpatrick, who has 96 tackles and an interception this season. Moving on to the Ravens offense, Lamar Jackson is one of just 6 quarterbacks with a win percentage of over 70% since the 1970 merger, but is the only one of those guys with a losing record in the playoffs where he's 2-4. Jackson is the first player in NFL history with 40 or more passing touchdowns and 600 or more rushing yards in the same season. He has 41 passing touchdowns and 915 rushing yards in 2024. He's also the first player in NFL history to lead the NFL in passing yards per attempt, 8.8, and rushing yards per carry, 6.6, in the same season. In this one, it's the downfield passes, so anything intended to travel over 10 air yards that I'm going to focus on, though. Jackson had the most downfield passing touchdowns, 27, and the highest passer rating, 137.3, on them in the regular season. But he did throw an interception in their Week 11 tilt on a downfield pass. Another fun fact, Derrick Henry has averaged the most rushing yards per game in December or later in the Super Bowl era, and that includes the playoffs. He averages 99.8. That's ridiculous. And Pittsburgh allowed a season-high 220 rushing yards to the Ravens in their Week 16 loss. Since as of right now, Zay Flowers' status is unknown, I want to point out that Rashad Bateman has 5 deep receiving touchdowns, which is tied for the second most this season. Only Jamar Chase had more. Oh, and of course, I can't forget to mention that Mark Andrews led the NFL with 11 red zone touchdowns, which is actually 100% or all of his touchdowns this season. And on the Ravens defense, we have to give Kyle Van Noy some love. The man has set career highs with 12.5 sacks, 14 TFLs, and 21 quarterback hits this season. He also has 5 straight games with a sack, which is the longest active streak in the NFL. Does he make it 6 this week? I think so. Both he and Cam Hayward have been on some shows with me at the NFL Network, and Kyle Van Noy and Cam Hayward, they are A-plus humans. That is absolutely not predictive, but look for both to be epic on-air analysts to trust in the future. They're going to give you some edges. Okay, getting down to business here. The bottom line is that I have the Ravens by 10 points, 27-17. Baltimore winning ranks number 1 in confidence of the 6 games this week. If you started to pick up on some of my favorite things, you will notice that I love excellent defensive back play. And a guy who really should be on the short list for Defensive Player of the Year is Kyle Hamilton. He is a big advantage for the Ravens, not only in this game, but moving forward in the playoffs. So specifically, it's Kyle Hamilton playing safety. Since Week 11, Hamilton has lined up as a safety on 69% of snaps. In Weeks 1 to 10, it was only 26% of the time. Here's what happened in regards to defending deep passes since Week 11. Baltimore's defense has allowed the 9th lowest completion percentage over expected, the 5th fewest yards per pass attempt, and only 1 deep passing touchdown. That is tied for 2nd fewest. And they've been the best in terms of passer rating allowed on deep passes. It's just 37.3. You're better off throwing the ball into the dirt. Just as a comparison, that passer rating in weeks 1 through 10 was 116.1 with 7 such touchdowns allowed. As a Russ reminder, he's attempted the 5th highest rate of deep passes, has the highest completion percentage over expected. It's positive 15.1%. That is the highest by 5.4 percentage points. However, as of late, that efficiency is on the decline. Which brings us to our Wildcard Weekend Saturday menu. I'm going to put together 2 3-course menus for you again this week. You can, of course, reconfigure them to make them your own menu, but my first one will feature 2 bland projections and 1 spicy one, and the second will be 1 bland and 2 spicies. Just as a reminder, bland ingredients happen in at least 55% of my simulations, and spicy ones happen in 48%, but with enough volatility to make the juice worth the squeeze. Menu 1, number 1, a bland. Jaylen Warren to have more than 19.5 receiving yards. He's surpassed this in 4 of his last 6 games, and this season he has 821 scrimmage yards, which is the most by any player without a start this season. Number 2, the second bland. CJ Stroud to pass for fewer than 231.5 yards. I forecast the run game to be effective and efficient, which helps Stroud stay ahead of the chains, aka not having to heave it into that Los Angeles number 1 scoring defense in obvious down and distance situations. And number 3, the spicy one. Lamar Jackson to rush for more than 48.5 yards. Derrick Henry went for 162 against them in Week 16, and Lamar only had 22 on the ground in that matchup. In Week 11, Jackson only had 46 rushing yards. So what gives? Why are we going over 48.5? In this game, I have a faster pace and increased pressure rate forecast for Pittsburgh, meaning more possessions than both regular season games, which is also why my total is more than 43.5 points. On to the second menu for the week. This one is a little hotter. Number 1, the bland ingredient, a Derrick Henry touchdown. Do I even need to say anything here? In my model, he ends up in the end zone at least once in over 77% of simulations. Number 2, a spicy ingredient. Justin Herbert to rush for more than 18.5 yards. With the league's second highest pressure rate defense and being a bottom 8 defense in terms of explosive passes allowed, Houston could set up a situation where Herbert will use his legs, especially if his offensive line and running backs are injured. Even if they play and they're not 100%, this bodes well for rushing yards for Herbert. Ingredient number 3, this is the second spicy one. This one is a Joe Mixon touchdown. This is spicy in part because he had a 32.3 rushing yard per game average and 0 rushing touchdowns in the final 4 games of the season. And the Texans have called run at the lowest rate of any playoff team, just 41% of offensive plays. But that forecast to increase in this one, plus their forecast to be an addition of a few more screen passes, which bolsters his pay dirt projection. If you want to tail this play, you can find it on Underdog and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash using the promo code NUMBERS. I will see you back here for the rest of Wildcard Weekend's games in a day or so. And of course, projections, scores, and more, they are ready for you to use as you wish on Thursday, January 9th. Thank you so much for hanging out. Please stay safe. And if you like the show, please like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and pass it along so we can continue to grow.